Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be talking about the astrology of May 2026. So I am recording this on the 13th of April 2026, and I am noting how powerfully our earthly story is reflecting the skies. I've spoken about this a lot. I post over on Threads every time I notice an interesting story in the news that corresponds to the symbolism of the skies. And it just seems like it's going on and on and on, rather like this Aries stellium that we have very strongly now, and by the time this video goes out it will have started to break down, but I'm sure we're going to be living with the scorched earth repercussions of this time period for a while yet. Certainly things are still very tempestuous, and I had already thought, and I think lots of other astrologers had thought, that the original sort of ceasefire deal that was agreed upon wasn't likely to continue. So let's see what's happened between now and when I post this video. But I just wanted to reference it anyway, because of course this is going to, like I say, have repercussions. Mostly because of the cost of living. Again, Chiron's going to be moving into Taurus later this year, which can bring up some issues to do with food and agriculture and so on as well. We'll look at that nearer the time, but I'm just mindful of how things are starting to unfold. But I've also been very captivated by the alternative story that the skies have shown us about how we can use these energies with the extraordinary Artemis mission, the incredible inspiration, the bravery of these 4 astronauts, how they have become heroes. And this is all Neptune in Aries. Of course, there are other factors playing out in the astrology of that particular mission, but Neptune in Aries speaks of great quests into the unknown, huge new beginnings, epic stories of great leaders, and the kind of leadership that fills us with inspiration and hope and lifts us up and expands our consciousness. Neptune is to do with transcendence. And so certainly there's nothing like drawing everyone together, pulling everyone together by showing the earth as a whole, remembering that we are all living on this planet together. And so I was marveling at how the universe is presenting us with these 2 great extremes, as above, so below. That's what they're telling us and showing us, but also the potential of how we can work with these energies. We're not just puppets of the gods. We can either make war or we can make peace. We can either give up or we can bravely forge into new territory and look on the world with wonderment and awe and inspiration. I've just woken up to the news today that Hungary now has a new president. They've elected Peter Magyar over Viktor Orban. So after 16 years of being in power, Viktor Orban is out. And that's huge, because here we have the fall of one of the corrupt leaders. His leadership, his government has been referred to as a kleptocracy. Here we have the fall of somebody who has played a huge part in trying to keep that corrupt system alive, and a change of mood in the populace. And there is a fantastic photo, I did post it over on my Threads yesterday, where all the people in the square are celebrating the new president's election, and they're all holding these candles. So it's a sea of fire, very Neptune in Aries, a really inspirational picture and a wonderful sign of hope and light returning to the world. So this Aries action that we've got going on, or was going on in April, is going to sort of continue for the first couple of weeks of May. The first half of the month still contains a lot of Aries action, even though the sun has moved into Taurus. We're in Taurus season as we come into May. There's still a lot of emphasis, and will continue to be so, because we've got all of the Saturn conjunct Neptune story that is going to be hit on again and again and again. Every time something moves into Aries, it will trigger that story. We've also this month got Pluto stationing retrograde. We will have Mars changing signs and getting into it with Pluto. There's a bit of tension coming with those two. There's also some tension around the nodal story as well. And we will have Uranus and Sedna meeting in Gemini. So we begin the month with a full moon in Scorpio. This is on the 1st of May. It's the first of 2 full moons this month. The month is bookmarked by these lunations. So we have a full moon in Scorpio, 11 degrees, 20 minutes of Scorpio. And that will be at 5:23 in the afternoon in the UK. And this is quite a tense lunation because it is going to square Pluto, also Juno as well. So, of course, Pluto is the ruler of this lunation. So that tells us that there is some kind of conclusion or crisis that is centered around Scorpio themes, which is associated with shared resources, truth, trust, power, control. And then we have Pluto, of course, power and control and transformation. Also the shadow side, corruption and darkness, things being in the dark. So we have some kind of critical issue going on here that is pushing us to pay attention and figure out what's mine, what's yours, what do we need to change to ensure this is all fairly distributed. That's a word that I've got in my mind, some kind of issue to do with distribution. I'm pretty sure this is going to be connected with all of the oil stuff and the Strait of Hormuz. That's going to be ongoing. So we've got some big stories continuing in the collective. For the more personal story, I will be talking about this in a special podcast over on my Substack for my Substack members, where we dive deep into each lunation, looking at the asteroids and the Sabian symbols as well. But still, we do know that we have something going on here that is illuminating these power brokering issues to do with our shared resources. We then have Mercury moving into Taurus. That's on the 3rd of May. So this starts to slow things down a bit. The mind slows. We start to think in more practical ways, and we find our thoughts are focused on the matters of Taurus, which are to do with our finances and how much things cost and how much we've got saved in the bank. So we're concerned with our security with Mercury going into Taurus. And like I say, the way that we think tends to change as Mercury changes signs. And so the fact that it is slowing down our communications and bringing this much more thoughtful, methodical frame of mind, that might be helpful. We do have Mars forming a square to Jupiter on the 5th of May. Mars is also getting into a conjunction with Eris and Chiron now as well. So it's kind of working its way towards these challenging stories that are centered around pain and wounding, connected with conflicts and the male wound. And now we have the urge to go overboard, to take some kind of really big action, to make an impact. It's loud. You know, Jupiter magnifies things, and Mars is already hot and sweaty there in Aries. He's just come off this frustrating, irritating connection with Saturn. If there's anger there, then Mars would not have liked being slowed down. The image that comes to mind is almost like an arrow, somebody pulling back the string on a bow, and there's all this tension building and building and building. That was Saturn conjunct Mars. And now we can let fly. But the problem is that maybe we've gone off target a little, or it's some kind of overreach with Mars square to Jupiter. So this is the one to watch, because people can get over enthusiastic or overly angry, overly reactive. So we kind of need that slow thought of Mercury to try to dissipate some of that tension. Pluto then stations retrograde. This is on the 6th of May at 5 degrees and 30 minutes of Aquarius. It will stay in retrograde motion until the 16th of October, and it will station direct at 3 degrees 4 minutes of Aquarius. So as usual, just going back over a couple of degrees. Pluto, of course, moves very slowly. This is normal. Pluto goes retrograde every year for around 5 months, and it gives us time to internalize what we've already learned so far on Pluto's recent forward journey. So he's always working on transforming, changing, empowering, getting rid of what we don't need. That's the basic function of Pluto. He also helps us to evolve kind of spiritually, because we are processing and getting rid of trauma so that we can feel more empowered and we can take more direct action. Pluto in Aquarius is transforming society. It's transforming society through maybe technological means, because Aquarius can be connected with those kinds of themes, ruled by Uranus as well as Saturn. And so we do have a big story here about how the future is going to change and how free we feel, and who is in power. Pluto, who holds the power over the group. So there's lots of themes in play with Pluto in Aquarius, but as it is in a sign of the higher mind, it does speak of changing our mind as well, changing the way we think and communicate. And of course, we have a very similar story too with Uranus in Gemini. This is the wake-up call, the shake-up in our communications, the way we think, the way we use the mind, the way we connect with one another. So there's so much happening here. So Pluto is going to go retrograde, and it feels like as we sort of internalize this story, we're going to probably have to look at what have I been thinking, what information has come through to me here, what have I found out here, what do I know here, who and what do I trust here. And when I say here, it's wherever it's happening in your own charts. I have 2 videos, in fact, on Pluto in Aquarius for the signs through the houses, so you can listen for your rising sign. So I'll link those below if you haven't heard those already. So again, it's just going to be going over this material and looking at, okay, what do I need to let go of? Where might I be disempowering myself because of the way I'm thinking about things? Where am I disempowering myself because I am being held back by my fears? So there's a lot to work with whilst Pluto is retrograde. Mars will then join Eris on the 13th of May. I'm just flagging this up because Eris can be a truth teller and a troublemaker. She is the goddess of discord. Her brother Mars, of course, is also to do with conflict. There are some positives to both of them, the truth and the strength that comes from Mars, the bravery that comes from Mars. So it could actually encourage some people to tell the truth, to speak up, to step forward, even if they are going to be ridiculed or even if they are going to be disliked for it. The courage to be disliked. Wow, Mars conjunct Eris. We then have Vesta moving into Aries. That's also on the 13th of May. So I just want to point this out because, again, it's one of those activators of Saturn conjunct Neptune. Vesta is about focus, devotion. She says this is sacred. And here she's going to be in Aries right up until February 2027. Because there's going to be a retrograde of Vesta in Aries. And also, if you remember, I mentioned last month that Pallas, who has just recently gone into Aries, will also have a retrograde in this sign. So these two goddesses, one of strategy and creative intelligence and pattern recognition, Pallas, and then Vesta, the goddess who is associated with the hearth fire and homecoming, the idea of keeping the inner fire alive, keeping Rome alive by keeping the flame alive. So she's basically saying we need to dedicate ourselves to keeping our inner flame, our inner light blazing in the face of all the anger, all the frustration, all the things that are going on, the conflicts that are going on, the wars that are going on. We need to keep our own inner flame vibrant and alive. We need to do what we need to do to keep that going and to see that as sacred, and maybe to see each individual as sacred, to remember that we each are a spark of the divine, even though sometimes people in the world don't always express that divinity. But we are all connected. But now, as Vesta has moved into Aries, it's a time for sacred devotions to the self, to honor the self, to remember the self. We then have the Sun joining Mercury. So this is the superior conjunction on the 14th of May. And as you can see from the chart here, they are also joined by Ceres. So Mercury is conjoining the Sun and Ceres on the 14th of May, and then the Sun will conjoin Ceres on the 15th of May. So this is the superior conjunction, which means that Mercury is disappearing into the light of the Sun. It sits on the throne of the Sun, receives the inspiration, the guidance, the information from the Creator, and it's then born as an evening star. Over the next few weeks, finally, Mercury will emerge from the rays of the Sun to be this evening star. So we start to shift from being forward-thinking to more reflective as Mercury goes through this process. But I'm very interested in the fact that this dialogue with the gods, this huge illumination, this conversation is centered around Ceres, the goddess of the grain in Taurus. So she's very strong in Taurus. There's a resonance between Ceres and Taurus. So she's the goddess of the grain, she's goddess of crops and foods. One of the things Ceres did when she was incredibly angry that her daughter had been swept away by Pluto is that she stopped everything growing. She raised it to the ground. She said, no, nobody's having anything. If I can't have my daughter, then tough, I am not going to let anything grow. And so it kind of feels like maybe this is what's going on here. There's some big highlighted, illuminated conversation that is centered around issues to do with food, crops, nurturing mothers, everything connected with Taurus as well, security, food and resources. This is a really big source of possibly contention, just because we have all of that Aries stuff still going on at the point we have this triple conjunction between Mercury, the Sun, and Ceres. We're going to have Vesta, Neptune, Pallas, Saturn, the Moon, Eris, Mars, and Chiron all hanging out in Aries. So yes, some contention going on. Mars will then conjoin Chiron. This is also on the 16th of May. Mars will conjoin Chiron. So now we have action that is centered around healing, maybe trying to build bridges or burn bridges. Again, I've been talking a lot about that recently. It's a continuing theme. We can be brave enough to heal, or we can act out or take action, be reactive because we are hurt, or we can simply cause harm through our actions with Mars conjunct Chiron. So we do have to be very careful. And then this entire story becomes even more animated because the 16th of May, as Mars conjoins Chiron, is the date of the new moon in Taurus. It happens at 25 degrees of Taurus, so slap bang in the middle of this triple conjunction, which, as this lunation is also going to be in a conjunction with Uranus, suggests a new conversation or a new way to share things. Maybe there is some story here about broken alliances, changing alliances, because Uranus can shake things up and Gemini is the twins. So we've got some kind of break up that is discussed here that also precipitates some kind of new conversation or new commerce with Mercury, some way of exchanging goods with Ceres. So these are the stories that are coming into play. Again, I will talk more about this lunation over on my Substack. And for all of us generally, whenever we have the new moon in Taurus, it is a new beginning centered around our desire to feel more secure, and also a really good time to work on our financial picture, what we hope for, our energetic relationship to money and also to the body as well. Taurus is the first of the earth signs, so we have a relationship with the body. Remember, Venus is the ruler of Taurus as well. On the 17th of May, Mercury will then enter home sign Gemini. So Mercury has now found his winged sandals and helmet, is back on home turf or at home in the air. And this is going to speed up our thinking, and it's going to put our mind firmly in the realm of thoughts, communication, talking to people, sharing ideas. The voice is animated. We are excited. This can be the kind of influence where we feel like there's a lot happening all at once, but we're kind of ready for it because Mercury is curious about everything, and Gemini is always seeking to make connections of all different kinds, whether it's connections between people or connections between ideas, connections in our own mind, in our own brains. So neurons are firing with Mercury going into Gemini. Mars then moves into Taurus. So this is a curious state of affairs in some ways, because Mars, of course, is moving out of the sign that it rules into a sign that is particularly associated with being slow moving and methodical and grounded, and let's just see what happens. We like to do the same thing every day. And so Mars can get a little frustrated in Taurus, technically because Mars is the co-ruler of Scorpio, the old ruler of Scorpio, and Taurus opposes Scorpio. It means that Mars is in detriment in Taurus. So it's harder for it to function, but it doesn't mean that it can't function at all. And it doesn't mean that this is useless energy. I have personally my own Mars in Taurus, and whilst it is hard to get things started, that I definitely experience personally. And that's one of the things that we can struggle with Mars in Taurus. Again, we don't really want to change things in Taurus. So we don't want to do anything that's going to upset the status quo here. So that's a difficulty. But the positive is that it is incredible energy for keeping things going, for constancy. After all, whatever we start in Aries land, we want to be able to complete. We want to get to the finish line, and Taurus helps with that. So if we can apply ourselves and sort of mediate our energy so that we can be focused on the marathon, not the sprint. That's the idea really with Mars in Taurus. If we can do that, then we can really use this energy very well. Mars in Taurus is good for cultivation, as long as we're not trying to rush things. So in other words, digging up the seeds to see whether they've grown yet. That's not going to help. And wherever Mars moves, it shows us that the way to do things is slowly, methodically, practically. Use the old tools or the old wisdom that you already have. So that's the way to get the goal. And our goals might change so that they are centered around Taurus themes: how to survive, the money that we have, the resources that we have. How can we use those resources we have as a tool to help us achieve our goals? So although it's in detriment, Mars can actually work very well in this sign in certain ways, as long as we keep a lid on our frustration and any desire to hurry things along, because that just won't work. Venus then enters Cancer. This is on the 19th of May. Of course, Jupiter is already there in Cancer towards the other end of this sign, but it puts both the benefics in the same sign. So it's going to be activating a certain part of our own charts, which feels like a blessing. It feels like this area of life is being lifted up. Venus going into Cancer speaks about our relationships, and wherever Venus goes, it tells us how we're approaching our relationships. So Cancer is a water sign, so we certainly want to make a very emotional connection. We want a relationship that feels like home. We want a relationship that feels familiar and comfortable, particularly in Cancer. We want that comfort that comes from being nurtured and cared for and looked after. Cancer is associated with home, so spending time at home with our honey, that is Venus in Cancer. I'm also just thinking of actual honey as well, and the fact that it can be a lovely transit for anyone who's a foodie. If you enjoy making food, cooking food, eating food, then Venus in Cancer can also work really well for that. But it's what we're attracted to right now. Venus is all about what calls us, what tickles the heart. What we're attracted to is this feeling of belonging and to home and to feeling comfortable. The sun then moves into Gemini on the 21st of May. So now the themes are changing. The sun is beginning to illuminate this area. Gemini, the twins, communication matters to do with our neighborhood, how we get about in our local area, taxis and buses and trains and all forms of transport. It's also connected with our communication systems. It's our news and our media, and things are picking up here, especially with Mercury here and of course Uranus here. Things are picking up here. So there's likely going to be a lot of emphasis on who is talking about what and the news that's coming through to us. There's a lot of conversations happening here. And there's a really big conversation happening because as the sun goes into Gemini, it immediately activates Uranus and Sedna. It's moving into a conjunction with those two, and Uranus and Sedna form a conjunction with one another on the 24th of May. And this is just one conjunction the two of them are going to make. Although they did travel very closely together for a while, they were actually on this 1 degrees of Gemini for a bit, but they didn't quite perfect this conjunction. This was last year in 2025. But now we have come to the point of contact. And as I said that, I got all kinds of goosebumps coming out on my hands. Gemini is associated with the hands. Mercury rules the hands. and Mercury rules Gemini. So something's going on here. Contact, of course, that just leaps into my mind as Jodie Foster in the film Contact, which is all about contact from aliens, from a very advanced society. And I think many of you who've been here before know that I am calling Uranus in Gemini the ET phone home transit. So, you know, I'm really holding out for alien contact during this transit. But I also think we could read this in many different ways. So Sedna is about in this case in Gemini, is about the evolution of consciousness. She moves incredibly slowly. If you are not familiar with her story, basically she's an Inuit goddess, and she was betrayed by her father, cast out of a boat. They were trying to escape a monster, and her father basically kind of chopped off her hands. He was trying to save himself, and she was left drowning in the ocean, and the pieces of her went down to the bottom of the ocean and became all the different sea creatures, and eventually she fully transformed into a sea goddess. And the saying goes that if the fishermen are good to her and they untangle her hair, if they are good to her, if they treat the ocean kindly, then the ocean will give up its resources. In other words, the fishermen can get fish and humans can eat. So we need to treat her kindly to get the best from her. But her story speaks about evolution through trauma, through suffering, through great difficulty, and sometimes through betrayal. And because she has an 11,000-year orbit, she's very much connected to our collective story, the story of humanity. And right now, whilst she is in Gemini for a very long period of time, she is going to be helping us to evolve consciousness, to evolve how we use the brain. Uranus, of course, is awakening us to the possibilities here. We're learning about the mechanics with AI and just generally computer advancements, quantum computers. All of this is going to take off during these years with Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius, I just spoke about before. But this point where Uranus conjoins Sedna, I wonder if when we look back, when we are in the future somewhere and we look back, will 2026 be that defining point when somebody's talking about the splitting of the atom? So, of course, I know that's connected with atom bombs, and I know that we'd probably rather not be talking about anything to do with nuclear bombs whilst all the other stuff is going on. But I feel like it's kind of symbolic. It's showing us something extraordinary is coming through here. And I do wonder, actually, if it is to do with something about atomic energy. I mean, maybe this is the key. It's not just that we are scared about bombs. There's also the potential, the good potential of atomic energy, or it's just to do with talking about these minuscule quantum worlds. Maybe this is the time that quantum computing suddenly takes a leap forward, or this is the time that we hit artificial general intelligence. I guess some people would already say that it's getting close to that. We can have a conversation with ChatGPT or whatever, and it can fool us, or at least make a very good attempt to fool us that it has some kind of human response. So I'm wondering if Uranus conjunct Sedna will speak of a huge leap. We might not know about it just sort of generally on the world stage, because often we hear about these kinds of advancements much later down the line. They sort of often say, well, there's kind of hearsay that we're about 10 years behind when it comes to technology. So what's being developed in laboratories somewhere is kind of, I want to say, light years ahead of where we think we are. So I think there's something here that's going to be seeded with Uranus conjunct Sedna, that is going to affect each of us very personally, because the sun is going to be here as well, mixed up in this conversation. That tells us that what happens around this time, or the results of this incredible evolution of consciousness that is going to shake everything up, this is going to affect each of us. The sun is personal. It does make me think, though, because the sun is the creator, symbolically speaking, and it is the source of life. Literally, it's the source of life. So I am thinking about all the stories of how we are in the process of creating life like robots. We're trying to create something that looks like us. Remember, Gemini, the twins. We're trying to create something that looks like us. We're trying to create something that sounds like us, that thinks like us. We're trying to be creators. The sun, we're trying to be gods. That has a lot of weight to it, because are we ready? Are we ready for that kind of creation? So there's a lot going on here. And it's even more important because on the 25th of May, the day after Uranus conjoins Sedna, the sun will form a square to the nodes. So that is what we call the moon wobble, because we're now halfway between eclipses. And it is often a time that is noted to be somewhat tense in the outer world. It can correspond to weather events. It can correspond to any sort of natural disasters. It can correspond to conflict as well. And so the sun at 4 degrees of Gemini, squaring the south node, 4 degrees of Virgo, squaring the north node, 4 degrees of Pisces. So we have a pressure here, a pressure point in our karmic evolution that is connected with this wake-up call, Uranus in Gemini, that is changing the face of things. Are we brothers and sisters? Are we all connected? Are we listening to one another? All of this is brought into this story, and it feels like there's potential for shocks because Uranus is involved here. It might be shocking communication. Something comes out that rapidly pushes us towards our karmic evolution with the North Node in Pisces. And then on the 26th of May, just to ramp up this tension, Mars will then form a square to Pluto. So again, Mars in Taurus, where it has to move slowly. And then Pluto, this is like I'm trying to hammer against an immovable object. I am kicking and kicking and kicking at this steel door, and I'm going to carry on kicking until it opens. It's that kind of energy. Whether or not the door's going to bunch is another matter. Mars in Taurus is just going to keep going to try to move this, to shift this, to change this. Now, positively, Mars square to Pluto means that we have the ability, the drive to face our fears so that we can change things, so that we can take control where we can, because we can't control everything. And that sometimes is the frustration that happens with Mars square to Pluto. The fact that there are powers that be that do things that are beyond our control. So we have to just take control where we can. That's a really good way of using Mars square to Pluto. But the danger is, especially under this sort of wobble with the sun square to the nodes, that things could get very heated and people are fighting for control, fighting for who gets control here, perhaps of our resources with Mars in Taurus. Ceres will then join everyone in Gemini. So now we've got an interesting sort of story going on here. Still a lot of activity in Aries and now activity in Gemini. Mars, of course, still in Taurus. But we have some kind of talking point once again about our food, our crops. This is Ceres. But there's also something here about nurturing the mind, maybe nurturing young minds. That's what we need to be doing now. And food for thoughts, because what kind of information are you taking in? Because the type of information we take in can literally change the chemistry of our brains. If you're doom scrolling, then yes, you might get the odd dopamine hit, but eventually there is a lack and it becomes addictive because you are searching for that next hit. Serotonin can lower because we become more depressed with seeing negative news or angry comments that are designed to get a reaction and get a response, to goad a response from us. So Ceres in Gemini could also speak about these things, the need for us to feed the mind with good information, with good wholesome food, literally the kinds of foods that help the brain to develop, but also the metaphorical foods, the information that's coming in, because that affects not only the brain chemistry, it affects how we think, how we conceive of things, and ultimately how we communicate with one another. And then finally, we finished the month on the 31st of May with a blue moon. So this is a second full moon in a calendar month. This is the full moon in Sagittarius, 9 degrees 55 minutes of Sagittarius, 8:45 British summertime on the 31st of May. And so this lunation is going to continue this story. It might be the activator of the sun square to the nodes. Now the lights are square to the nodes. So we're activating a karmic story that is connected to our international communications, how we talk to one another. It's connected to what we believe with Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a sign associated with religion and philosophy and theories, universities, higher education. So we're maybe talking about what we know, talking about what we believe. There are big talks happening, big discussions. I'm noting that this lunation is in a trine to all of those planets in Aries. So it feels like there's some productive potential here. And most importantly, this lunation is going to amplify the message that we need to pay attention to the big picture. I imagine this lunation might be a turning point in some of the dialogue that's been happening between different places and peoples and countries. And because there is some supportive energy available here, I'm hoping that this will provide some kind of anchoring, some kind of grounding, so that we can start to cool down some of the heat that has been in the atmosphere. It is still tense and there are still conflicts in play, clearly with Mars also at 9 degrees of Taurus, so it's in a quincunx to this lunation. There's still situations that we're trying to resolve that are connected again with our resources. But at least the moon in Sagittarius will hopefully give us a higher perspective, because that's what we need to focus on to keep that big picture view in mind and to keep that faith in one another alive. So this brings me to the end of this reading for May 2026. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. It always helps the algorithm. If you would like to hear more from me, I do have a Substack or website, and also I'm on social media as well. So I'll drop all those links below. I will see you again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.